Well, good morning, church family. It's wonderful to check in with you once again. How are you going right now? How are you growing? What is God teaching you in this season? It's not always easy to answer that question. In fact, I'm not suggesting for a moment that it's easy to read what God might be doing in this season, let alone what he might specifically be teaching us. Last week we saw that Jesus in fact warns us against trying to infer too much too quickly from the circumstances around us. Those who raised the Tower of Siloam disaster with Jesus in Luke 13, 1-5, assumed that those people who died had done something to warrant God's direct judgment and specific judgment on them. And Jesus said that's not the case. Nevertheless, not to draw any moral or spiritual lesson from disasters or COVID-19 may be nothing more than an indication of how far we have sold ourselves to the forces of secularization in our society. Our society and its people who we are members of, if we are not careful, if we can resolutely refuse to hear what God says when he speaks to us in the language of judgment, you know, that is exactly the response of ancient Israel. In fact, in Jeremiah 14:14, there was a good collection of religious leaders who denied any connection between the disaster of the drought and the divine judgment. There are plenty of other places that we see in the Bible this connection between God's specific judgment as a result of sin, but that's just where I've been reading lately in Jeremiah. So here's the kicker for us. Not only will teachers and preachers be held accountable for what they say and teach, but the hearers are responsible for what they choose to listen to. So I want to ask you, do you just listen to the secular media's interpretation of current events and history? Or do you have your face in God's word, discovering his actions throughout history? The God of the Bible doesn't just interpret history, he creates it. When he speaks, it happens. And so we must learn from the past and God's working in his world to understand what he might be doing. COVID-19 may not be direct judgment from God, but make no mistake, there is a moral and a spiritual lesson here for us all. And if we are not interpreting what is happening to us in our city right now through the lens of God being the great actor and the great director of all of history, then we are both naive and foolish. So what is God teaching you in this season right now?